often being from the mouth. You can actually measure it with a meter. And in the cavity, you have often by chewing gum or drinking hot coffee or hot tea or warm meals, you have an increased amount of mercury vapor leaking from the fillings, going straight via the clapless veins, 8 centimeter, and then you are at the pituitary area, and behind that the pineal area, and it goes straight into those glands, and stress there are ruling hormonal functions for the whole being. So that means, Mads, that I would like for you to start this, because I would like to show you an example of how important this Frank, is it? Here we go. I just think det went to the. Jeg tager den der IoT. So here we go. This one. Thank you. So an international organization called, det var IAOMT, ja. Nej, den der nedenunder til venstre. Den der. Smoking teeth, poison gas. Der. Tak. So we'll play a little sequence of this. And this is a tooth being extracted, and we are looking at a 25-year-old amalgam filling being...
All mercury silver fillings leak substantial amounts of mercury constantly. The amount increases with any kind of stimulation, and as a result, mercury from fillings produces the majority of human exposure to mercury. The International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology is extremely concerned about the anecdotal claims of safety by manufacturers and dental trade associations. They're at variance with the published peer-reviewed scientific evidence to the contrary. The precautionary principle requires action once the possibility of harm exists. It does not require proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that in the case of heavy metal and xenobiotic exposure is both nearly impossible and unnecessary, in our opinion. What you're seeing is mercury vapor coming off a 25-year-old silver amalgam filling in an extracted tooth. The background is a phosphorescent screen. The mercury vapor absorbs the fluorescent light, and you can see it as a shadow on the screen. This is mercury coming off a filling that was dipped in water that's the same temperature as the human body. This is a filling that was rubbed with a pencil eraser for just a few seconds. Like going to the hygienist and having her clean your teeth. These are not small amounts of mercury. If you can see it, it's more than 1,000 times higher than the Environmental Protection Agency will allow for the air that we breathe. What about the last time you went to the dentist and they drilled on your tooth? Here is the mercury vapor every time you raise the temperature to 110 degrees with hot coffee or warm water, or even chewed on it. Mercury comes off fillings every time you stimulate them, and that stimulation causes the mercury to continue to leak out of the fillings for an hour and a half at a minimum. Some people grind their teeth. Some people chew gum. The dentist might send an old gold crown to the dental lab to be welded. How about the dental personnel? They're not being given informed consent. Back in 1985, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology set out to determine the amount of mercury that was coming off fillings. And here's the graph, showing substantial quantities of mercury were measured coming off fillings. And then we estimated the total dose. And then we began animal experiments and put radioactive...
This reminds me of a person calling the clinic some years ago, having a really bad experience of having his teeth cleaned. And he asked my clinical assistant what has happened. And what he had experienced was an acute experience of mercury toxicity or poisoning with some of the symptoms that you saw before. And he was dizzy and aching and many things. And he asked for a reason. And said, what have you done? Well, yesterday I was to my dentist that had all my clean teeth. Do you have amalgam fillings? Yes, a lot. Okay. Another time, don't have your dentist to polish your fillings so they look really, really nice. Because at that point, they excrete a lot of mercury ions and the other ions that are in an amalgam filling. So that's the risk of being a proper dentist, not knowing what he or she is dealing with. In the US, we have a limit on work fields on 50 micrograms per square meter. In Denmark, 25 micrograms per square meter. But this is often the situation when you remove amalgam fillings. You have to take the proper precautions not to poison your client, your patient, or your clinical assistant and yourself. So that whole procedure has been clarified by IOMT and also DSOM in Denmark. So we have procedures that we have to operate within. And does it form a toxic compound? Yes, it does, because the methyl group is often the methyl, this organic mercury is taking place in the mouth, but can also take place other places, organs, like in the stomach, with the use of bacteria in the small intestine as well, large intestine, even vitamin B12 has been found to create or facilitate the creation of the possible 100 times more poisonous aspect of mercury, the methyl mercury. And this is also the aspect of mercury that passes the placenta membrane and goes to the feces from the mother, maternal blood circulation. And often we have from researchers seen that there's a factor of 17 to 19 degrees higher poisonous impact in the fetus bloodstream than in the mother's. So we're dealing with risk, and it makes a lot of sense when people think of creating family, that both man and woman have fillings removed to clarify the semen and the eggs so they can create beautiful children. An American doctor, Sandra Denton, working with Hal Huggins at that point, also been in Denmark a single time. She worked in Seattle, helping infertile couples, couldn't get children. And after having a dentist, local dentist, removing their amalgam fillings and her being the advisor of detox programs, nutritional plan, they regained fertility and could create beautiful children. So, and here we see some chemistry in terms of how the aggravation of the methyl group can take place in different ways in the organism. And over the years, we have had these amalgam wars. I believe it was in the mid-1850s. In the 1850s, there was a clash of the old schools and the new dentists in US having a so-called amalgam war. We had one in the 30s, and we have had a few of them from the 70s on and on up through the 80s and 90s. So finally, like the Swedish initiatives and now on the EU level, the research groups finally declare that we have on EU level have to phase out mercury in the near future. But I mean, we have had initiatives in Scandinavia since the 70s, the 80s, and Sweden were possibly the foremost inspiration for other countries in that matter. Well, why measure current? Because oral galvanism battery function in the mouth is a reality, and you can have it between a gold crown and a silver filling, and between silver fillings, or you can have it within the same structure of an amalgam fillings, say a plaque covered side and compared with a grinding occlusal surface. So the more I can measure, or we can measure current, the more atoms or metal ions are released. And sometimes the dentist will jump in terms of surprise level. And here we have the chart of the electromotive series, where we see aluminum as the least noble, and as the most noble we have gold, and in between we have the ingredients of an amalgam filling. So here we have a cathode in a battery speaking, and the anode where the oxidation takes place, the area of corrosion. That's where we saw this on this side, the very dark amalgam filling, heavily corroded, leaking a lot of metal ions. And there, out of that situation in the mouth, we form a lot of soluble oxides, chlorides, sulfides, and mercury vapor. And out of that, and the hydrogen electron creation that takes place, generates corrosion and low pH levels. Is that enough to create illnesses? Yes, it is. And his summary are different organ systems and function systems that he have found, like the chart of the symptoms showed, that it has a wide spread of symptoms. You cannot say that mercury poisoning is these two symptoms. It tends to be a situation for, as a neurotoxin, it goes to the weak spots in the genetic setup and exposes the weak card aspect. So, as a therapist, know your client and support the weak spot, so the immune status and the recreational power is optimized. Then you create good results. So what are the common immune suppression symptoms? And this is again from Hal Huggins. And you can see the percentages out of 1,300 mercury toxic patients. Depression very high. Suicidal tendencies, as I mentioned, with the dentist as a profession. Cold hands and feet, and also the tingling, numbness and tingling on hands and feet. Not good for a professional who lives from his or her accuracy in the handwork. No good. Here we have some where we suspect things to happen. Unexplained fatigue. I mean, that's a modern lifestyle experience, the fatigue level. And then at this point I will also add that since 2004 I went into the discussion of mobile radiation and all that, and started advising my clients to protect themselves. At that point you could actually buy a harmless mobile on the internet, and the firm was funded by 2 Danish lawyers going to US in the late 80s, early 90s, working on top of some experiences, some scientific research in the western US by Litovich, who helped the American Navy to balance out their radiation problems from the radar in the marine system. And he found out that if you put a biochip on the radar, you could modify the normal amplitude of the radar radiation, so it went into a chaotic characteristic